Why are HVAC ads so expensive? That's a question I get every single day from HVAC contractors just like you. In this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly what you could expect to spend on different advertising platforms. But I'd also like to reformulate for you this whole idea of expensive and start thinking about ads in terms of your return on investment. So let's dig in. There's going to be a lot of math. Okay, let's first talk about the 4 major platforms that most HVAC contractors advertise on. The first is Google Local Service Ads. These are your starter ads because you're only paying when you get qualified leads. So this is often the very first platform that people use when they're getting started with ads and just dipping their toe in the water when they're usually less than $1 million in revenue. These ads, you may spend between $80 and $110 per lead, depending on your market, but they're very qualified leads. Your second platform is Google pay-per-click ads, also a Google platform, but here you're paying per click rather than per lead. So you might only spend $10 to $30 per click, but if you don't have great landing pages, you're not going to, and very good keyword research, you're not going to get people to give you a call or fill out a contact form. So in terms of your actual cost per lead, you might be spending anywhere from, in less competitive markets from $60 or $70 all the way up to $180 or $200 in a market like Dallas or Los Angeles. That's very, very competitive. Your third platform is Facebook ads. Facebook ads has a relatively low cost per lead. You might only spend $30 to $50, even if you're running a campaign that is focused on installations. That sounds good, but we're going to get later about why that might not be the best value. Okay. The fourth platform is Yelp. Yelp is a very easy to manage platform, and for the most part, you can actually do it yourself, but you're going to spend somewhere between $60 and $100 per lead. Okay, so you can see there's a variation from on the very low end, $40 per lead, to the higher end, maybe as much as $200 per lead if you're talking about Google pay-per-click. So some people might be like, well, why would I ever want to do Google pay-per-click? That's 5 times as much. But we're not talking about leads. We're also talking about quality leads, the amount of time that you and your sales team have to spend taking from an initial hand raising of them expressing interest, giving you a call or filling out a form, to an actual booked appointment where your technician is showing up their door to do a service call or to provide an estimate for an installation. Okay, so now let's look at the math. Let's look at those cheap Facebook ads that might produce leads at $40 to $50. How qualified are those leads? The answer is not very. You might get dozens and dozens of leads that have really no interest in your services and that really were just on the spur of a moment while they were searching on Facebook for their friend's wedding, decided to fill out your Facebook form, right? They weren't really focused on, okay, so now we've looked at the general math of how much you might pay for a lead. So some people would say, well, why would I ever pay for a lead on Google pay-per-click if it's 5 times as much as a Facebook lead, which can be your cheapest leads, right? But now the next thing to look at when you're asking why are ads so expensive is to not just look at that headline number of the cost per lead, but actually ask yourself, take it through the whole supply chain of your sales process and say, okay, there's that lead. How many of those leads did we actually convert? And of those leads we converted, what revenue did it produce, right? So that's the concept of return on ad spend, which is really where I want you as an HVAC CEO rather than just an HVAC contractor, right? Really as someone who's thinking strategically about your business, I want your head to be in that space. So let's look at the economics of what that might be, right? So for example, we have one client who in March, they got 100 leads from Facebook, 103 leads from Facebook with an ad spend of about $4,000. Well, that sounds great. That's less than $40 per lead. And it was, but with those 100 leads, they ended up getting 6 installations, and that produced $70,000 in revenue. Okay, so they took $4,000 in ad spend and ended up with $70,000 in revenue. That's a return on ad spend of over 17 times. That's a great, great result. But they could only do that because they had a really good sales team that could take those 100 leads and translate them into 6 installations, right? So from those 100 leads, they had to call and they had to follow up with people. They had to go to about 15 different houses, some of whom said, no thanks, I don't want the installation, to finally get those 6 installs, okay? So you have to ask yourself, that sounds like a great return on ad spend, but do I have the sales force? Do I have the capacity and the time to be hounding those leads to the end of the earth? And that really is what you have to do on a platform like Facebook where you have a lower cost per lead. Okay. Now, let's look at the very other end and say Google pay-per-click. Let's say you're getting a cost per lead of $120, 3 times as much as what you might get on Facebook. Sounds not great, but your close rate is going to be a lot higher. And the reason for that is if I'm looking for HVAC services, I'm probably going to Google. Maybe I'm going to ChatGPT, maybe I'm going to other platforms. But the most common thing that homeowners are doing still in 2026 is looking for home service providers on Google, not on Facebook, right? Because I have an intent to buy. So the customers that you're getting are much more qualified, right? And so, we had a client that spent $70,000 on Google Ads over a 6-month period. That sounds like a fortune. But they were able to translate that into $1 million in revenue, but without that same aggressive sales team that was required. They only had one sales rep answering the phone, doing dispatch, right? So for them, a higher cost per lead, but without that extra friction of the sales process really made more sense, okay? Now, in both cases, these clients got an extremely favorable return on ad spend, right? So when you're talking about expensive, you say, oh, $4,000, I don't want to spend that on ads. But wouldn't you, if someone could give you a magical machine that you could put $1 into and someone would give you $17 out, wouldn't you use that machine all day long for your business? Yeah, you would. So thinking of expensive, not in terms of how much you're spending, but how much you're getting is really what I want to reformulate for you. So now it is valid. If you're saying, why are leads so expensive? Why are ads so expensive? Then that may be in the past that you have not had a great experience with ads. Maybe you were trying to run Google Ads yourself. Maybe you were trying to run a Facebook campaign with someone who doesn't have a lot of experience in the HVAC industry. Maybe you went on Yelp and you felt like you got a ton of really bad leads, and there are bad leads on Yelp, but there are also good ones. And you thought, oh, I give up, I'm not doing it, right? That's very common. But ask yourself, there are people in your market that are $50 and $100 million businesses. And I can guarantee the 95% of them, if they're in the residential space, they grew using different ad platforms. That's where they got leads, right? SEO is powerful, but really the core source of scale is through your ads. So there are people who are winning at this, but way they approach it is really in a very data-driven way. So they're not thinking of the expense. They've reformulated it to say, let's look at the data, and if I can spend this money and get a result that is giving me, even a 5-time return on ad spend, then I know with my profit margin, I can make that profitable. And then the problem with my business, because I still have problems, the problems in my business become, how do I hire and train, dispatch, and great technicians well enough to keep my brand at the high level that I always want it to be at, right? So you still have problems in your business, but those problems, if you run ads in the right way, are no longer leads, no longer how much you're spending on advertising. Okay. So yes, it is valid to have that anxiety about ads being expensive. But I can assure you that when you work with the right kind of agency that really knows the HVAC space, that understands the difference between all of these different platforms, and the right platform for your sales team, for your technicians, for your level of experience at closing and the typical close rate that you have on both service calls and installations, right? Who can build you the landing page, who's listening to every call so they know what type of leads are working well for you, what aren't. Type of agency that knows the service area that you're working in and the zip codes where you're going to get the most valuable leads. When you can put all that together, ads are an investment, but they're no longer an expense. They're no longer a drag on your profit margin. So if you have more questions about this, or if you still have some anxiety, I'm happy to walk you through this on the phone. I talk to HVAC contractors all day long, and feel free to book a strategy session, and we can look at some real data on how you can get the best return on ad spend for your money that helps you grow and reach your goals. Thanks. Look forward to hearing from you.